Okay, let's begin. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which I am joining you from today, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. A few housekeeping rules before we begin. I will be muting everyone at the start of this webinar, so please keep yourself on mute throughout the presentation so as not to disturb our speakers and hamper the conversation. If you have a question, please feel free to type it into the chat box and we will facilitate it in our Q&A session. So let's begin with a bit about SiTara's story. SiTara's story is a not-for-profit charitable organisation registered in Australia. We believe that strong women build strong communities and nations. SiTara's story started in 2017 in Australia with the aim of advancing equity for women and girls through advocacy, education, philanthropy, and research. We seek to build not only the self-esteem, but the self-worth of girls and young women within our community, and beyond changing their outlook on life, also broadening their horizons and helping to empower themselves. We've been creating mental health awareness within the CALD communities in Australia, as well as in Bangladesh. In Australia, we partner with Pansy, Headspace, Mental Illness Education Australia, and today with Canberra Cultural Women's Forum. And we have Laura from the Canberra Cultural Women's Forum who will be speaking to you shortly. In Australia, we've organised a host of activities and competitions such as essay writing competitions. We've facilitated high teas. We've invited MasterChef contestant Rashidul Hassan to promote creative activities for happiness. We believe that engaging in trusted conversations and creative activities will help foster a healthy mindset. We're also trying to bridge the gap between Canberra and developing countries. So a 2013 World Health Organization report on violence against women found that physical and/or sexual intimate partner violence within Southeast Asian countries had the highest prevalence globally at 37.7%, with the Eastern Mediterranean region and the African region following at 37% and 36.6% respectively. Now that's pretty high. The report also found that partner violence is a major contributor to women's health issues, particularly depression and suicide. So what are we doing about this? Well, SiTara's story helps raise funds in Australia to help not only our communities here in Australia, but to help vulnerable groups in Bangladesh, because we believe early education is key. We fund mental health awareness workshops led by certified professionals in underprivileged schools in rural areas in Bangladesh, where they don't have access to any support systems and where speaking about mental health can be stigmatized or seen as a taboo. So far, we've conducted mental health first aid training for teachers, workshops with students, and workshops with parents on positive parenting, trauma management, and students, targeting around over 1,000 students. Why this webinar and why this series of webinars? Now, in March, when COVID became prevalent in Australia, we actually realised the impact of COVID on our mental health, and we began a series of webinars to inform and connect with our communities. This is one more in a series of webinars that we've already conducted. To view our past webinars, please log on to our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. Now, this specific webinar comes to you in October. Did you know that October is Mental Health Month? Mental Health Month occurs each year in the month of October and encompasses World Mental Health Day on October 10th. The key theme for Mental Health Month 2020 in the ACT is conversations and connection. So we thought, what better way to celebrate this month than by hosting a webinar for multicultural communities? Because multicultural communities face unique barriers. Mental health is never an easy topic to discuss, but the more we raise awareness about it, the more people we can help. And so in that spirit, let's begin, and I'm going to hand over to Laura from Canberra Multicultural Women's Forum to introduce herself and her forum. Laura, over to you.
Shafin, thank you so much for that welcome. And I welcome everyone to the webinar this evening, and thank you for joining us. It's quite an honour and privilege to actually partner up with SiTara Story and with MIEACT tonight to present you something so relevant at this time. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Canberra Multicultural Women's Forum. We are part of the Canberra Multicultural Community Forum. We're a subcommittee, and we've been around for about 3 years now. And we're an advocacy body for women of multicultural background. We aim to take the concerns, interests of women of multicultural background to influence policy, and we try and improve the outcomes for the communities that we deal with. So we, in our time, have held various consultation forums to seek out the concerns that multicultural women have. We've held one to find out their experience of accessing services in the Canberra region. And from that, we actually compiled a report and we took that to government. That was 2018. So that's one of the activities that we've done that was commissioned by the Office for Women. We also have held capacity building events. We've partnered up with the UN office in Canberra. We've held some leadership events where we've sought out to bring multicultural women who are interested in taking their leadership journey further. And we've given them some training in sort of media training, communication training, and things to that effect. So in that area of capacity building, we will be holding one more event. Possibly, we had to postpone it because of COVID. So we're looking to hold it early next year or at the end of this year. So if you are a woman of multicultural background who's interested in a leadership role, we're holding an event to help you with that and build up your networks and things to that effect. So our activity is varied, and we get our funding from different bodies, and we do lots of different types of things, from consultation to capacity building to linking multicultural women to areas of need. I'd like to actually now talk about MIEACT, so Mental Illness Education ACT, MIEACT. They're the primary local mental health and wellbeing education provider for workplaces, community groups and secondary schools across the Canberra region and surrounding area. So since 1993, MIEACT has delivered evidence-informed programs, partnered with lived experience stories that increase mental health literacy, promote early intervention, reduce stigma and emphasize recovery. What makes MIEACT unique is that they bring small audiences into direct positive contact with their volunteer educators who share their stories of living with a mental illness. Such face-to-face contact is a proven powerful stigma reduction model, importantly guided by a safe and non-triggering do no harm framework for both storyteller and viewer. In addition to their overarching mental health workshops, their programs cover topics including stress, body image, PTSD, bullying prevention, communicating, and hearing stories safely. And they ensure participants leave not only with an increased knowledge of mental health, but practical tools to manage, support, and practice positive help-seeking behaviours. So we're very excited tonight to be partnering with MIEACT and SiTara Story. And I'd like to give the floor now over to Zainab, who's going to give you some information about Jessie. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks so much, Laura, and welcome everyone. I'm also from the Canberra Multicultural Women's Forum, and our next part of the webinar will be doing a little Q&A with Jessie from MIEACT. So Jessie is an experienced mental health professional with more than 15 years experience in the not-for-profit and government sectors. She completed her nursing qualifications in 2007 and has worked predominantly as a mental health nurse and case manager. Her background includes specialising in comprehensive assessments, complex crisis intervention, and triage assessments and allocation. And she has extensive experience gained through the development of the Through Care program. So that program provides comprehensive case management for prisoners in the lead up to their release from prison and transition to life outside of prison. She also worked as a mental health case manager in a community-based men's mental health facility. So we feel very privileged to have Jessie with us today, and really excited for her insights into mental health, especially in the multicultural community. So what's going to happen now for the next 20 minutes, we're just going to do a little bit of a Q&A with Jessie. We have some pre-prepared questions that we're going to ask Jessie, and then she'll be able to give us some insightful tips on mental health. We'll then pass the floor back to Shafeen, who will share a story. And then after that session, we'll open it up for our participants in the webinar to also have a Q&A session with Jessie too. But in the meantime, anyone participating at this point in time, feel free to type any questions or comments in the chat, and we can work those through the webinar as we progress. So I might start with our first question for Jessie. Welcome, Jessie. Our first question is, mental health can be quite stigmatized in multicultural communities, and was just wondering, in your opinion, what are some good ways to remove that stigma and start to raise that topic with friends and family?
Well, thank you so much. And I just wanted to say it's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity, because I feel that it's more of an opportunity for me to build on my networks and, delve on my passions of helping people in the community. So thank you so much. Culture is very important to me, and to tell you a little bit about me, I love to learn about other cultures, food, traditions. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I think that it creates a feeling of togetherness. So the way I see it, sharing our experiences and feelings can create further togetherness. And that's one of the ways that we can address and reduce stigma, is talking about things and normalizing those kind of conversations. It can also, having those conversations can also create that more of that feeling of togetherness. And sharing those experiences can actually empower other people to share their own experiences. So the more that we talk about these things, we start to empower others, but we also start to break down that cycle of stigma. We're all experienced in stress, I think. From my own experience, I quite often feel stress. I think every single time I talk in front of an audience, I feel a bit of stress. So I think we all can share those experiences. And I think even with the impact of COVID-19, I think we've all experienced stresses, and it's all impacted us in different ways, and just expressing, how we're feeling, and letting people know that it's okay to be not okay. I think highlighting with your peers and your loved ones that we all have those experiences, and also relating those experiences back to your body's natural response mechanism, because and I'll talk a little bit probably about it a little bit later, but our bodies have a habitual natural response to actually respond to stress, and that is completely normal, and it is part of the way that we survive as humans. So yeah, I think that's probably about all I have to say on that one. I could go on forever, but noting we only have 20 minutes, I'll take it back to you.
Cool. Awesome, thanks so much. So that's a really good way to start that conversation around mental health, and obviously the topic for today is focused around how we have that with multicultural communities. So when we are talking about mental health and multicultural communities, what should people be aware of around the intersectionality between culture and mental health?
It's a great question. And, you know, I think it's one that sometimes for me can be so difficult to even break down and look at, because there's so many elements to take into consideration, and it really is based on your own experience and your own culture and what's going on in your life. But I think culture doesn't shape kind of what's in front of us. Like you know, when I was talking about food and language and things like that, it's not just those things. You know, culture also impacts our belief system, you know, our norms, our social norms as communities, and our values. And that can in turn impact on our behaviours and what we think is acceptable. And I think it's difficult for me to say, but in light of what we're talking about, it's completely understandable to have those feelings associated with your culture. So I mean, in case of mental health, your culture can actually impact on whether you seek help or not. So I think it's really, really important to really think about that and challenge that as well. I think the culture can also have an impact on the way that we see mental health as well. I think in some cultures it is quite separate from what's going on in our bodies, but the two are very much interlinked. And I think, you know, researching that and actually looking into how your mental health and your physical health are completely interlinked, it really, and educating others around you about that can really be empowering and can really assist you in your own culture to start those conversations and feel more empowered and more confident in starting those conversations. I think it's really important that we understand the role that culture plays in our own mental health and well-being. And try and educate ourselves. I mean, this goes for me as well. I come from a European cultural background, and it was something that we didn't talk about. Also, in particular, my parents were in the military, so it was even more so something that wasn't spoken about. And I kind of played a part in educating slowly my own family in a respectful way about that interlinked relationship between your mind and your body, because quite often or not, when you are sick physically, that's impacting on your mental health and well-being, and vice versa.
That's a really great point. And sometimes we are, you know, sometimes we think, oh, well, mental health is about the mind and we can just train our mind to, you know, take some strategies to make our mind better in a way, but we have to realize that our mental health is also impacted by our environment, and it's a very holistic thing. So where do we start, especially for multicultural women and people from multicultural backgrounds who don't want to ask their circles and want to keep things private for the time being? We acknowledge sometimes there is that stigma or uncertainty in actually starting or having a conversation. And what's your advice on where to start?
It's funny because I knew some of what these questions were, and I got really passionate and wrote up all this stuff, and now all these other things are coming into my mind as well. So I'm going to say the one thing that I want you to know is don't be hard on yourself. It is difficult. Self-stigma is also something that plays a role in this as well. So please don't be hard on yourself, and make sure that you're kind to yourself and that you understand that, you know, we all have our own, or you may have, and we all have our own barriers to help seeking. But when it comes to that question, you know, where do you start? Start by being kind to yourself. And then I think it's also not just a matter of when do you, how do you start? It's when. And I think we should all start now. So even if you don't think that you have any concerns about your mental health and well-being, prevention, self-care and communication are so vital and so important. So where do you start? Yourself. Self-reflection. It's my favorite thing in the whole entire world. I do it every second of every day. I ask myself questions and I check in with myself. What do I need? Why am I feeling this way? Oh, I'm a bit tense at the moment. Why am I feeling this way? Am I nervous? You know, really reflect, start to understand your body's responses. You know, ask yourself, do I need a little bit of assistance? Do I need to talk to someone? You know, we all do sometimes. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think culturally, that's another thing that can impact our ability to get help, is that we think, oh, no, I don't want to put this problem on somebody else, or, oh, no, I can deal with this myself. But it's important to understand that sometimes we do need a little bit of help. Treat yourself as you would a friend or someone that you love or hold dear. What would you tell them if they were experiencing difficulty? Would you say, yeah, reach out and get some help? Would you sit with them and listen? I think you would all definitely do that. So treat yourself that way as well. The other thing is, I bring it back to, again, like the last question, when I did discuss the your body's natural response. And I think where and when to start kind of really correlates with that, because I think we are more likely to start now and change our own behaviours if we understand that our body has natural response mechanisms to keep us safe and to survive. And I'm sure most of you have heard of the flight, fright, and freeze responses. And they're our body's natural responses. So whether it's stress or anxiety or a traumatic event, your body will respond unconsciously to survive. Chemicals, you know, oxytocin, lots of different chemicals will be running through your body and impacting how your body is responding. It's actually completely unconscious, and it's not something that you should ever feel self-stigma about, because it's actually your body trying to respond to what's going on. And I think thinking of it that way, and when you are talking to other people about it, and you are talking to them about mental health and well-being, or even physical health, it's that interlinked connection, and your body actually putting mechanisms in place to assist you survive in that moment. And I think that really helps me sometimes when I am struggling. I realize, oh my gosh, you know, I've got a bit of a stomach ache. Oh, I'm really not feeling well. I am feeling a bit stressed. Hang on. My body is telling me to slow down. My body is telling me to take a breath. Why am I feeling this way? Start that self-reflection cycle. So yes, I think also where to start, have those open conversations. Like I said, you know, talk to a friend, talk to your friend about this webinar. That's a great start. You know, oh, I went to this webinar. This is what happened today. You know, how do you think about this? What do you feel about this? You know, that empowerment and self-education of your self-education, and then spreading that education and talking to other people about it, those conversations. I think culturally this can be really, really difficult for some, and culture is really, really important. But help seeking and reaching out, discussing mental health and wellbeing can be empowering and change lives, and your community's lives as well. Finally, sorry, I know I talk a lot. Start small. Don't expect that you have to, you know, make a huge change right now. It's just starting small, being kind to yourself, realizing that, you know, you can do small things like reaching out to a friend or talking to a family member. Going to a support group, that's a great way. Within your community, you know, start a support group in your community. Volunteer, do something that makes you happy and makes you feel empowered, and also make sure that you prioritize yourself. You know the saying, I don't know if you know the saying, but when you're on a plane and the mask drops down, and they always say to you, you've got to fit your own mask first. Now, I used to think that was silly. I used to think, of course I'm not going to fit my own mask first. I'm going to help everybody else on that plane. But what I didn't realize, and what I've come to realize, is that, yes, I do want to help other people, but if I don't actually fit my own mask first, I can't help anybody else. You know, if I pass out trying to put my mask on, then I can't I can't help anybody else. Sorry, the other way around. You know what I mean. But yeah, it's really important to make sure that you fit your own mask first.
Thanks. I think that's a really great analogy in terms of, you know, how important it is to prioritize yourself, because if you aren't taking care of yourself, you really can't take care of those people around you. And I mean, we're at this stage, it's just very high level conversations, and these conversations can go a bit deeper. But say we have taken some steps to take care of ourselves, and we start to see things in our friends or family that indicate that they may not be feeling okay. How do we approach conversations with them or with someone we think is suffering?
Look, this is a very personal thing, and it's actually a question I get asked a lot. And I think what's helped me in a non-clinical space is actually opening up about my own experience. So it doesn't have to be huge, but you know, if you notice somebody is maybe not at their best, is sometimes opening up about your own experience and starting that conversation, and insist, because that will actually enable and assist them to open up. So even if I'm saying, oh gosh, I'm a little bit stressed at the moment, you know, sometimes that'll open up that conversation for somebody else to go, oh my gosh, yes, that is happening with me. and then all of a sudden they start opening up to you because they know it's okay to talk about. So letting people know that sometimes it's okay not to be okay. And listening, sometimes just listening, because we don't want to be giving out, you know, I'm not sure if anyone's a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but, you know, I'm definitely not a psychologist. So I'm not there to be a clinician, or I'm not in a clinical space. I'm there as a friend. So sometimes just listening and letting people know it's okay and validating how they feel is really the support that they need in that time. Use your empathy and show people that you're available. Sometimes just saying, hey, I noticed that you haven't been yourself lately, and I just want you to know that I'm here if you want somebody to talk to.
Zainab, you're on mute.
Sorry. I think that was a really great point, Jessie, about that human need in a way to feel heard. And sometimes you don't have to give a response or an answer, but if you're just there being that sounding board for someone, being there for someone so that they're listened to and they feel heard, it can do wonders as well. So as there's that role of a friend, but we also acknowledge there are those roles for professionals. And in our communities, are people trained to speak about mental health from a multicultural lens, and where do we go to speak to them?
Yeah, definitely there are. So there's some resources that we're going to send through at the end of this webinar, but there is ACT Multicultural Men's Health, Mental Health, and these are all free services as well, I might add. There's the Multicultural Women's Advocacy ACT group, there's Embrace, and they also have support groups that I was talking about before. There's Mars Australia, engagement and transition support. There's a lot of organisations that are there to support. And sorry, just to go back to, you know, if you have a friend in need, you might not be an expert in that field, but you can always show them those links, or show them the resources that we send you, or say, oh, look, I'm hearing what you're saying, and it sounds like you might need a little bit of extra support, and helping them, you know, maybe go with them to that support group, or maybe go with them to call one of those organisations to assist. Taking the time and being interested in others is really, really important.
That's some really great insight, because I didn't know that there were so many organisations that focused on mental health in the multicultural communities. So yeah, we'll be sending that around to our mailing lists, and yeah, just really great to know that there are those support networks out there too. So this question is a bit of a funny question, because I think it comes up a lot internally in your own internal dialogue, but how do you know if you need mental health support and not just time to relax?
This is a great question. And again, I think that comes back to self-reflection. So checking in with yourself, asking yourself how you're feeling, allow yourself to be honest as well. Remind yourself that maybe your body's responding again to in the flight, fright, or freeze response to something that's triggered you. So, you know, allowing yourself and reminding yourself that, you know, it's okay to feel this way. You know, remind yourself that recovery, like from a broken bone, is always possible. I think some people view mental health or mental ill health as being something that you know, it's ongoing forever. And yes, it may be, but there is also recovery, and there is also well-being, and there are strategies and things that you can put into place to ensure that your quality of life is just the same as a broken bone. You know, our bodies are never completely the same after a broken bone. There are still things that we need to be careful of, and there's still things that we need to take into consideration because of that history of a broken bone. Be kind to yourself. That's a huge one, and I relate back again, as I was introduced by Laura. You know, we are guided by a do no harm framework, and one of the components of that amazing framework, which changed my life, is limits to helping and self-care. So, you know, being able to sometimes say, you know, no, I need to concentrate on me right now. One of the main ways that I know, one of the main ways to identify if maybe you need a little bit of extra help is also to ask yourself if you're able to look forward to things. You know, reflect again and look at your current state of mind and think, okay, but am I looking forward to things that I normally look forward to? Am I finding enjoyment out of the things that I usually find enjoyment in? And if the answer is no, then it might be time to reach out. I would suggest reaching out way prior to that, just because it increases those conversations, reduces the stigma, addresses the stigma, and can also empower other people to open up those conversations. But in light of starting small, you know, if it is getting to that instance where your current state of mind is lasting for more than a 2-week period, I would suggest that that would be a great time to start linking in with some of those services. I did, sorry, Zambia, I did want to just touch on one more thing.
Yeah, sure.
Back from when we were talking about supporting friends, because this kind of interlinks really well in that space. And I'm sorry to jump back, but I just get very passionate about these things. I think it's really, really important to take time to learn about other people's cultures. And that's something that's really sung true for me. My husband's Greek, and the way that he experiences things and the traditions that he has are very, very different to the things that I have, my past and the things that I hold dear and think and traditions, but they've actually become a huge passion of mine now, and I absolutely love sharing in his family's traditions. And I think that it's really important when you are trying to help your friends or family or loved ones, or anyone, is to actually take the time to get to know them and ask them questions about themselves and possibly the impacts or barriers that they are finding when it comes to help seeking. Because sometimes just having that conversation about them and their lives, one, opens trust, but it also opens that conversation of barriers. And, you know, particularly from being on this webinar, you can then, you know, say, oh no, that's your body's natural response. I know some great places that we can go to for assistance, or make sure that you keep talking. And always focus on, and this is another underpinning value of our do no harm framework, always focus on recovery and hope. So always bringing it back to, there is hope, it's okay that you're not okay, but there's hope, and it's going to be okay. So just always re-emphasizing that.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And as we reflect on, especially those intersectionalities between culture and mental health, and the role that culture plays, not just in mental health, but in all different aspects of life. Once we start to be able to develop those tools of self-reflection, we're able to then extend that to the people around us and learn about them in more detail and in a more empathetic manner, so that we can respond to people. So acknowledging that just because we may have a certain way of doing something or addressing a problem or taking care of ourselves doesn't necessarily mean someone else will have that exact same way. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a cultural parameter. It can be just their own personality. So there's lots of different things to consider when you are working, well, I guess having those conversations with people as in that mental health space, or in just a general friendship space.
Yeah, I think just one other thing. I think something that really helped me was meeting people where they're at, and also, realizing that everybody is the way they are because of a reason. So there's always a reason why someone might be seeming to be a certain way or exhibiting certain behaviors. So when somebody might, a friend might be a bit mean towards me or treat me in a certain way, I actually stop and I think, okay, what could be the reasons behind their behavior? And thinking of things that way, because culture could be a reason, or it could be a past experience that person's had. And then start the conversation with that person about, oh, hey, this happened and it made me feel this way, but I just wanted to talk to you about, possibly how that happened or why that happened. So just remembering there is always a reason, because that really, really assists with building those connections as well, in our own cultures and other cultures, and just in our friendship groups.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you think about how layered, if you reflect on yourself and think about how layered you are as a person, then, everyone else out there in the world also has those very similar, well, all those different layers to them as well. The person on face value too. So on that note, thank you so much for taking us through some of the the conversations around mental health and addressing stigma and how we can start to approach the conversation. And we'd like to turn this next part of the webinar into thinking about real world examples and their applications. So I might pass it on to you, Jessie, and then we can introduce Shafeen as well.
Yes, one of the most beautiful things that I do within my role is I get to empower others to share their lived experience stories. And it's such an important aspect of reducing that stigma, particularly within our own communities. So first of all, I am going to introduce Safin, and I want to also thank her so very much for sharing today, and just tell you how inspiring and empowering you are. And I hope you all find this experience of hers and journey of hers as empowering as I do.
Thank you so much, Jessie. I really appreciate that introduction. So while some of our viewers are thinking of some questions to share and ask Jessie, I would like to share my story. And the reason I'm sharing my story is because I believe that sharing our stories makes us stronger. It shows us that we're not alone in what we're experiencing. So in February this year, I was lucky enough to go on a holiday, and it was a great holiday. I actually really enjoyed it. But as we started planning to return to Australia in early March, the stress of COVID-related travel triggered anxiety in me. My flights were cancelled. I had a long transit in Singapore. I wasn't sure how I was going to get back to Canberra. I knew I was stressed, pretty obvious, but I didn't actually do anything about it. I prioritized getting back into the country, which, you know, as you do in flight or fright situations, I guess your body, as Jessie said, kind of jumps into gear and you do what needs to be done. But even when I returned to the country, I didn't really take a moment for myself. I got back and our landlord informed us that she had sold our apartment and that we had a couple of weeks to find somewhere else to live. So I was then again in a situation where I just had to deal with it while I was self-quarantined and self-isolating at home. So I wasn't allowed to go anywhere for 2 weeks, but I still had to find a new place, arrange inspections, get my friends to do the inspections for me, and, you know, basically just trust that things were going to fall into place. And even talking to sort of like the COVID hotline and the legal help centre and things like that. But eventually we moved into another place all by ourselves. No friends and family could help us during COVID. And again, I knew my stress was building, but I didn't address it. I prioritised moving house. On top of all of this, I was working from home, and the pressure of my fast-paced client-facing work was only increased by working from home and actually having no separation between my workspace and my personal space. I began to work longer and longer hours without addressing the stress that was building up inside of me and the anxiety. And most of all, like Jessie mentioned, I started neglecting self-care. So simple things like watching Netflix or taking some time out to speak to a friend, go for a coffee. These were things that I slowly stopped doing. And I found myself working all the time. People kept asking me how I was. You know, whenever you join a meeting, a Zoom call, a video call, it's the first thing people ask you, how are you doing? And the machine response that I began to generate was fine. Yeah, good. And that was the response I gave other people, and it began to become the response that I was giving myself. So I would ask myself how I was, but the answer would be fine. And I knew I wasn't. Because growing up in a migrant family from a Southeast Asian background, talking about mental health and reflecting on it, it's not part of our culture or our family discussions. You kind of just suck it up and move on, and you absolutely don't share it with family friends because, you know, what will people say? So, you know, I was doing what I thought was normal and just powering on and powering through and hoping it would go away. And it didn't. And finally, a situation at work made me break down. And I sat in the car outside the building and I cried. It wasn't your normal kind of crying. It was a loud, whole body shaking, runny nose kind of crying that I haven't done in years. And I had this loud, hard pounding in my chest that wouldn't go away. So I went to see my GP, who ended up making me go to the emergency department. And it was there in the emergency department at hospital that I realized that I can't continue like this. And it was my body's way of saying enough is enough. So I finally realized that I needed help. No matter how strong I was, these were a series of events that weren't normal. We weren't living in a normal time, and I needed more than my usual resilience. So I opened up to my husband, my close friends, and I also opened up to EAP, which is workplace counselling. And what I found was that reaching out to different people actually helped me get different perspectives on my problems and my issues and how to work through them. So that's my story. I wanted to share it with you in case, you know, you found some similarities there, or you found just a bit of comfort in knowing that you're not alone in the things that you're growing through. But Jessie, I wanted to pass it back to you. In retrospect, what do you think I could have done differently? How do you recognize those signs early? And what are some self-care activities that could have helped with that building anxiety?
That's a very, very, very hard question, because I don't think that you necessarily did anything wrong. I think that, you know, anyone in your situation could have possibly done exactly the same thing, and there would be nothing wrong with that. But I think not being afraid to not be okay. That's easier said than done, but I think the sooner that we do reach out and talk to somebody, the better that we become, and realizing that if you don't actually make time for your mental health and well-being, then we're going to have to end up making time for ill health. And that really shook me when I read that, because I went, yeah, that's right. I actually do need to make time for me, and do it even when you're feeling well. So I think that's something that I wouldn't necessarily change about what you did, but what you could put into action now is to make sure that you are prioritizing yourself. You are doing things that make you feel healthy and well. Self-care. I always used to think that it was selfish. It's not. It's really, really important. You know, find what works for you. Not the same thing is going to work for everyone, but for me, I love listening to music, lots of different types of music. I love learning. So I'm always learning and reading things. I also like really bad TV. So I do that for myself sometimes, you know, so make sure that you are implementing those things, self-care, and finding what works for you and implementing them as much as you can. Even if it's just sitting outside and drinking a cup of tea for 5 minutes and just letting all your thoughts float away. I think one of the other strategies that I utilized that really did change my life was the circle of control. So we all have a circle, and within that circle, they are the things we control. Everything outside of that circle, we can't control. But if you think about a little circle on the rim of our circle of control, and that's our circle of influence, it's just outside our circle of control. Okay, so what we need to do is concentrate on that inner circle of things that we can control and not worry about the things that aren't within our control. Okay, the only thing that we can do is sometimes influence things. So there might be something that would make me quite anxious. For instance, coming and talking at events, even though it's my job, I still get anxious every single time. So I put measures into place to assist me, and that's my circle of influence. So I'm influencing those control measures by just doing little things, researching, logging on a little bit early and making sure the IT works, you know, having an idea of what I'm going to say, remembering that I'm a passionate person, and even if I am really worried and anxious, that it's okay, you know, because I'll let my audience know that, you know, and it's because I care. So I do all those things that, you know, that ultimately I might not be able to control, you know, every element of what happens in a webinar, for instance, but I can influence certain things to make myself feel more confident and more at ease. So I hope that helps you, because that really, really helped me.
Thank you, Jessie. That was really useful, and I hope everyone else found it useful as well. So we were going to move into a Q&A session now. I've asked everyone to type anything into the chat box if they do have anything. So we might give people a couple of minutes to do that. And Jessie, if you had anything else you wanted to add, feel free while I wait for some questions to come up.
Great. So if I might just tell you some other little strategies that I use while waiting for questions. If you have any, please feel free to ask me anything. I'm an open book. But some other strategies that I do use, other than the circle of control, which really help me, is limits to helping. So sometimes, and I'm guessing that most people on here are much like me, and they like to help other people. And you're probably very passionate about helping other people. But just remember that, again, you have to fit your own mask first. And sometimes you have to say no. you know, to make sure that you're okay and to prioritize yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's something that I find very difficult to say no to, but sometimes I have to. And what I do is I just explain why I'm saying no. So one of the other things that I do is when I speak, I try to speak about mental health and well-being from a point of understanding purpose and context. So when I speak, I think about why I'm saying what I'm saying. I think about who my audience is and if it's appropriate. So just using those little techniques really helps me to, you know, when I'm speaking or when I am talking about mental health, to ensure that I'm doing it in an appropriate way, and to make sure it's safe. Sorry, I'm just reading. That's really, really lovely. Thank you for that comment. It's really, really great. Sorry, I'm just reading a comment that says it's okay to be honest and not to be okay, and to talk to friends or your community. And I think that's just amazing. If you walk away from today and you feel a little bit more empowered to start those conversations, and a little bit more like you, you know, that you are able to talk about things, that's great. And you should be proud of yourselves.
I might just ask a question rather than typing it in, just because I'm not too sure how to articulate it. So I might ask verbally instead. So one thing that I think I've heard a lot of people talk about is this concept of being busy and not. And if you're not busy, then people expect you to have the time to spend with them. But you kind of, you know, I've heard people say, well, it's not that I'm not busy, but I want to be able to just have that time for myself. And sometimes we don't have an reason to say why we can't make a social event, or why we can't make a catch up next week, but we may need a bit more space and we can make it the week after. Do you have any tips on how to articulate that need for time with yourself to your friends and family?
Oh, that's a hard one, because I'm much the same. I really like time to myself as well. I think remembering, and look, I'm going to take this from two angles because I want to give you the most out of my answer. Angle number one is that remind yourself that you actually don't have to give an explanation. You don't have to lie either. But you don't have to sit there and justify why you want to spend some time with yourself. I think also the other way that you can do it, if you actually want to kind of give some explanation, is basically just saying, I'm going to take some time out for me, and, you know, prioritize my mental health and well-being. So, I mean, that's another way you can do it. I mean, I wouldn't suggest lying. I've done that before, and you get caught out, and doesn't help anybody. So, yeah, I would just understand with yourself that you don't have to actually give an explanation. That, you know, you can just say, oh, sorry, I can't, but I will definitely come next time, you know, or I'll see how I'm feeling next time, or just focusing on the truth. So, you know, I'm sorry I can't come this time doesn't mean I don't want to come. So keep me in mind. And just showing people that, you know, you do want to be there, and that you will prioritize it in the future, but, you know, you can't be there this time. Does that help? I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great tip, to kind of not feel like you need to explain yourself, and also have that confidence to say it's not that you don't want to do something with them, but it's just time at this point in time to prioritize your own mental health. Yeah, I'm finding more and more a lot of people. I've heard a few people even come to me and say that they're struggling in how to set those barriers in place, because I think there's this concept of people going straight away to other people, are you busy? If not, then you can do this with me. When is the default, could the default really be, when do you have some time to spend with me, or go to the social event? Let's organize a time that suits us both. And that might be another way to address that too.
Yeah, focusing on the positive part of it. So, you know, being able to say, oh, look, I can't come this time, but, you know, let's organise another catch up for another time, you know, and not being scared. You don't have to give a lot of detail either. When I was talking about purpose and context before, I wish I had more time to be able to drill down with that with you, because it's so phenomenal and really helped me. But you don't have to share all the details about what you're doing and why. Just being able to say, oh, I haven't had much time to myself this week, so I'm really going to, you know, just have a bit of me time. I don't think many people would be upset at you if you said that. And if they were upset at you, maybe start to think about why. I just want to highlight what somebody's just said in the chat, because it's also something I want to expand on. And thank you so much, because it's really important. And I'm not going to say your name just in case you want to remain anonymous, but somebody's commented that your voice counts, and that really rings true. And please always keep that in the back of your mind, that everything that you feel is a valid feeling. You know, it's all valid, and your voice does count. And if anything, particularly being from a multicultural background, it's almost, I want to say this in a sensitive way, but it almost counts just that little bit more, because you are helping to overcome those barriers within your community. And I mean, not all communities have those barriers, but you know, I've seen a lot of, even my husband's Greek culture does. There is an element of it. And it can extend from culture, and it can be groups as well. You know, some youth really experience difficulty. So it's even more important that youth share their voices. So, you know, I really thank you for that comment. And I really want to inspire people and empower people to feel like everything they feel and think it is valid. So don't be scared to share your experiences.
Yeah, that was a really great point. So I'm just conscious of the time. We've got a few minutes till the end of our webinar. Might just open it up one last time to see if there's any other questions or comments people would like to make. So we have another comment here.
Oh, that's a great comment. And I wish we should do another session on that, because that's, sorry, I'll read the comment for everybody else. That sometimes it's easier to talk to your friends and family, but in a work setting, it can be used against your next promotion or your number of hours. And that's so true in our day and age at the moment. It is getting better, but that there is still stigma in a workplace setting. And I think the way that we're currently trying to address that is get into workplaces. So that's part of what we do at MIEACT, is that we go into workplaces, we share lived experience stories, we discuss the body's response. We try and educate and inform others. And I think that's a way that it can be done, is really educating and informing others. 75% of Australians will experience a mental health condition at some point in their lives. And that's only for the people who actually put their hand up and say, oh yeah, I have experienced some kind of mental health condition. When you think about stigma, you think about how many people actually haven't, you know, on the ABS data put down, yes, I have experienced it. I think that we'd find that figure would go up to nearly 100%, particularly in light of COVID-19 and the PT, potentially traumatic events that we've been through as a community. So, you know, I think that is a really important conversation to have as well. And maybe it's something that we could open up as a webinar of its own one day.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, we have so many different facets of our lives, and in one way, there is this culture at work that if you do raise a problem, it can be taken quite negatively among yourself, and it would be great to explore that further. So
I've got
that,
one last question,
yep.
if that's okay. It's a question on dealing with this as a friend. So where do you focus? Do you focus on your friend's feelings or your own assessment about the problem?
No, you focus on your friends. Sorry, that came across a bit blunt. So I would focus on my friend's feelings and definitely listen. So not necessarily kind of giving advice, but listening to her or his feelings. The only time that I'd kind of talk about me is at the start to try, if they weren't opening up, to say that, you know, I've experienced this, or, you know, and have you experienced anything like that? So that was more in a way of opening up those conversations if you're seeing that somebody doesn't want to talk about it. It's really important not to force people to talk when they're not ready to talk either. But yeah, I would definitely encourage that you would listen and talk to, listen and hear what that person had to say, and maybe ask open-ended questions, you know, and validate the way that they're feeling. So saying things like, I hear what you're saying, and oh, okay, that sounds like it sounds like you're feeling really hurt. So repeating back the language that they're using and letting them know that it's okay to feel that way.
That was a great question as well. Something that, you know, we probably don't think about as much because it's so natural for us to put in our own point of view, and you have to acknowledge the validity of someone else's point of view. And that's actually one of those key elements of understanding other people and where they're coming from, similar to what you touched on previously. So on that note, I might just say thank you everyone for coming, and especially a huge thank you to you, Jessie. As I mentioned before, we feel so privileged to have you and your expertise in this room with us and to share your insights. It's just amazing what you've done and continue to do in the community, and feeling really grateful to have you you spend your time sharing with us your knowledge and experience. And to all of our participants and organisers from the Canberra Multicultural Women's Forum and SiTara's story, and the other people in the community, thank you so much for coming and listening. We hope to continue these conversations on mental health and acknowledge that this isn't something that can be addressed in a 1-hour webinar. But what we are hoping to do is also start that conversation. So a really great aspect of this webinar is that it will be recorded, and you can share this recording with your friends and families and those people in your network. And like Jessie mentioned, it could be a conversation starter to more deeper conversations around mental health in your own networks as well. If you'd like any more information on this webinar, or on MIEACT or SiTara's story or Canberra Multicultural Women's Forum, please feel free to visit our Facebook page in a bit more detail. We've got our contact details addressed there. If you're not on our mailing list, you can also ask to be added on that, where we'll send out some post-webinar material as well. And on that note, I'd like to thank everyone. Thank you, Laura and Shafeen and Sharma as well, for being involved in the organising of this, and the other members of the Canberra Multicultural Women's Forum and SiTara's story for providing support into this webinar too. And have a lovely evening. Stay safe, everyone, and hope to touch base with you again sometime in the near future. Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you, Zainab. Bye. Bye, everyone.